The Langford estate ballroom glittered with golden chandeliers and crystal goblets when the impossible happened. Monica Harris, the black chambermaid, appeared at the top of the marble staircase wearing a blue evening gown, reflecting like fire under the lights. Conversation ceased. Laughter died. In slow motion, her footsteps echoed like thunder amid the uncomfortable silence of the elite. Charles Langford raised his champagne glass with a venomous smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present our special guest of the evening." The words, laced with sarcasm, drew cruel laughter. Some guests applauded mockingly, others recorded the scene with their cell phones, as if witnessing a grotesque spectacle. The collective laughter transformed the staircase into a stage of humiliation. But Monica didn't look away. Her eyes were fixed, her posture erect, as if she carried a secret no one there could imagine. There was no fear in her steps, only calculated firmness. With each step she seemed to dismantle, little by little, the farce that sustained that empire. They thought they were laughing at her, but within minutes they would be the ones being ridiculed in front of the entire world. As Monica finished descending the steps, the guests exchanged knowing glances. To them it was all a sick joke created by Charles Langford. Catherine, his wife, hid her laughter behind her champagne glass, pleased to see her little maid exposed before senators, businessmen, and millionaire heirs. The humiliation had been carefully set, like a golden trap disguised as an elegant invitation. Charles couldn't resist revealing the origin of the hoax. Days earlier, he had handed Monica a golden invitation, laughing with his wife. "I doubt I'll have the courage to show up." He had bet friends $100,000 that the chambermaid would never dare set foot in the main dining room. To him, it was cheap entertainment, a spectacle, to reassert his power. But tonight, Monica proved she wasn't a pawn in his game. She was the turning point, the elite's first ladies whispered. Margaret Whitfield, a senator's wife, whispered to oil heiress Lauren Price, "This is unacceptable and deliciously scandalous." Muffled giggles spread like wildfire. The ballroom, which should have been a symbol of elegance, became a stage for masked cruelty. But behind Monica's serenity lurked something none of those aristocrats could have foreseen. Monica walked steadily, her head never low. The blue dress she wore was no ordinary formal gown. It was the dress of her mother, Evelyn, a pianist who, decades earlier, had frequented the same mansion under very different circumstances. Every silk thread carried memories, every step a rediscovery of a painful past. Charles might laugh, but Monica carried within her the memory of secrets he'd tried to bury along with her own mother's name. In the center of the room, Charles clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our dedicated chambermaid. She's decided to trade the cleaning bucket for silk tonight." Laughter erupted, flashbulbs flashed, and embarrassment seemed inevitable. But as everyone laughed, Monica gently raised her hand, revealing something that silenced some of the audience. A gold ring bearing the Langford family crest. The hall shuddered. It was impossible not to recognize that symbol. The jewel had disappeared years ago. It had belonged to Edward Langford, the family patriarch. Monica held up the ring, her eyes steady and her voice controlled. "This dress is not a costume, and this ring is not a replica. Because I didn't come here to entertain you, I came to reveal who I truly am." Because Monica wasn't just carrying a dress, but the truth that Charles had tried to erase for decades. It all began days before the big event when Charles Langford appeared in the mansion's service corridors. With a mocking smile, he handed Monica a golden invitation. "Here it is, a special gift for our most dedicated employee," he said sarcastically, while Catherine, nearby, covered her mouth to stifle her laughter. The card glittered with elegant lettering, but to Monica it sounded more like a sentence. It wasn't a gesture of inclusion, it was a golden trap. Among his close friends, Charles couldn't contain his pride. "I'll bet you $100,000 she won't have the courage to show up," he said loudly during a card game. Laughter erupted. To these wealthy men, the idea of a chambermaid crossing the gates of high society was as absurd as a grotesque play. The bet quickly circulated, and soon the entire elite was eagerly awaiting the humiliation spectacle. But what Charles didn't know was that Monica was keeping a purposeful silence. Upon receiving the invitation, He showed no anger or embarrassment. He simply smiled discreetly, tucking the card into his uniform pocket. That night, in his cramped room, he opened an old box. Inside, his mother's blue dress and, wrapped in velvet, the ring bearing the Langford crest. The invisible chambermaid was beginning to prepare for an act that would change everything. As the guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits, Monica adjusted every detail alone in front of a worn mirror. The contrast was stark, but also symbolic. While the elite dressed in power, she dressed in history. Evelyn's dress wasn't just fabric, it was memory, dignity, and heritage. And the ring was silent proof of a lineage that Charles had tried to erase with time and lies. On the night of the event, when Monica appeared at the main entrance, the room erupted in whispers. Charles, glass in hand, nearly spilled his champagne when he saw her. Catherine squeezed her husband's arm, surprised by his boldness. Monica, however, didn't hesitate. She entered the room with firm steps, crossing the red carpet with a calm that confounded even the most arrogant. Charles believed he had created the perfect trap. But that night, he would realize he had invited fate itself to dinner. The main hall of the Langford estate was an ocean of luxury. Immense chandeliers, silver tables, an orchestra in the background. When Monica walked through the main door, the room seemed to freeze. Eyes turned to her, sharp blades. Margaret Whitfield, a senator's wife, dropped her glass in surprise. Lauren Price, an oil heiress, lifted her chin in disdain. To these women, it was inconceivable that a chambermaid would dare dress like one of them. But Monica didn't hesitate. The blue dress hugged her figure with quiet elegance, and each step sounded like part of a lifelong choreography. There was no rush, no shame. It was as if the entire room had become a stage, and she was the protagonist of a play no one expected to see. Her steady eyes swept the crowd with a calm that was more disturbing than scream. The orchestra's music seemed to change tone, adapting to this unexpected parade. Cell phone cameras flashed, recording the moment that would soon circulate backstage. In high society, whispers rippled through the room. "Isn't she afraid? Who lent her that dress? This is an insult." Each sentence was a poisonous dart, but none could reach her. Monica walked armored by something greater than silk, by a truth still hidden. Charles, watching from the balcony, smiled wryly. To him, it was all still part of the big joke. "Let her show off. Soon I'll show everyone who she really is," he murmured to Catherine. The guests, excited by the promise of scandal, awaited the moment of public humiliation. But paradoxically, each firm step Monica took weakened the collective laughter, replacing it with a strange unease. When she reached the center of the room, Monica stopped, took a deep breath, and lifted her chin. I didn't need to say anything yet. Her presence already spoke volumes. The dress, inherited from her pianist mother, seemed to shimmer in the light, reminding everyone that this was no ordinary chambermaid. She was someone with a story in her veins that could no longer be hidden. Charles believed he was in control of the night. But with each passing second, he realized that the real protagonist was Monica. Charles slammed his glass against the microphone, and the room fell silent. With a sly smile, he pointed to Monica in the center. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our most dedicated chambermaid. See how a mop can turn into silk for a night." Laughter echoed like whips through the air. Flashbulbs went off, capturing the scene as a bizarre attraction. It was the height of planned cruelty. Some guests doubled over in laughter, others filmed the footage to share later in the elite's private circles. Monica, however, remained motionless. Her gaze never wavered, her breathing even, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. With each laugh, each flash, she seemed to absorb strength rather than lose dignity. The silence she carried began to bother more than the joke itself. Then, with a slow gesture, Monica raised her left hand. A golden glint caught everyone's attention. It wasn't just any jewel. It was the Langford family ring, a unique piece that many there recognized instantly. The room shook with murmurs. Some stood in disbelief. "Impossible? That ring was lost years ago," whispered a guest. Laughter gave way to discomfort. Charles froze. For a moment his mask of arrogance disappeared. Monica broke the silence with a firm voice. "This dress is not a costume, and this ring is not an antique replica. It belonged to my mother, Evelyn, the Langford family pianist." The guests looked at each other, shocked by the mention of a long-forgotten name. The joke was beginning to backfire. Charles tried to react, laughing nervously. "That's absurd. A stolen accessory, nothing more." But the words no longer held the same force. Monica stepped forward and faced the audience. "You can laugh at me, but you can't laugh at the truth. Because this ring wasn't found by chance. It was passed down from mother to daughter." And for the first time that night, the elite began to wonder if the chambermaid was really just an unwelcome guest or something much bigger. The room, previously filled with laughter, was now utterly silent. Monica let the ring reflect in the chandelier's light, like a beacon in the darkness. Then she raised her voice, firm and calm. "My name is Monica Harris, but that is not the name my blood carries. I am the daughter of Evelyn, pianist of this family, and the illegitimate daughter of Edward Langford." Shock coursed through the room, like lightning through the air. The high society ladies clapped their hands to their mouths in disbelief. Some men rose from their seats, trying to protest, but the revelation was undeniable. Monica continued, "For decades, I tried to survive in the shadow of I grew up knowing my place was to sweep the floors that heirs walked on. But tonight is not about humiliation. It is about truth. The truth that Charles tried to bury, along with my mother's memory." Charles, pale, tried to regain control. Cheap lies, a maid trying to pass herself off as an heiress, but his voice echoed without the same authority. Monica stepped forward, eyes fixed on the crowd. "You remember Evelyn. She played the piano at family dinners until she mysteriously disappeared. She was silenced, but she left in my hands the proof of who I am, this ring and this dress." The blue dress seemed to shine even brighter, as if confirming every word. The hall was abuzz with murmurs. Some guests recalled the hushed stories about Evelyn. Others recalled past scandals the Langford family had always tried to hide. Monica then paused carefully. "But I didn't come here just to talk. I came to show." And with that, she turned toward the hall's main door. The atmosphere tensed, as if the air had stopped circulating. With an elegant gesture of her hand, Monica invited new characters to enter. Carolyn Reed, an investigative journalist, Michael Davis, an estate lawyer, and Dr. Robert Ellison, the family's longtime physician. They all moved toward the makeshift stage in the center of the room. If until that moment the elite still doubted Monica, the arrival of the witnesses marked the beginning of a scandal impossible to silence. Caroline Reed was the first to speak. An investigative journalist, she carried a folder crammed with clippings, records, and old photos. "For years, I investigated the disappearance of Evelyn Harris, the Langford's pianist. I discovered inconsistencies in the death certificate and suspicious transactions directly linked to the family." She held up a photo. Evelyn at the piano, with Edward Langford smiling beside her. The resemblance between Edward and Monica was impossible to ignore. The room erupted in murmurs. Michael Davis, the attorney, stepped forward. "I've worked on inheritance cases for 30 years. Mrs. Harris never waived her rights, and I found records that Edward Langford secretly allocated monthly payments to her and her daughter. These payments abruptly ceased the year of Evelyn's mysterious death." He displayed the documents, original signatures proving the connection. The impact was devastating. For the first time, guests began to view Charles with suspicion. Then came the biggest blow. Dr. Robert Ellison, the family physician, took the stage, visibly nervous. His voice trembled as he held the microphone. "I was coerced into signing Evelyn's death certificate as deceased by natural causes. But the truth is, tests showed arsenic levels in her blood consistent with poisoning." The hall shook. Gasps and suppressed screams echoed among those present. Charles paled, his eyes wide with panic. The doctor took a deep breath before concluding, "I couldn't bear this burden any longer." The mastermind behind this crime was Charles Langford. A deathly silence filled the room. His name, finally pronounced in front of everyone, transformed the atmosphere into a courtroom. Catherine took a step back, unable to believe it. Some guests stood, others filmed, aware that they were witnessing a historic scandal. Monica watched silently, letting the dominoes fall one by one. each testimony was a hammer blow against the wall of power Charles had built. Now it was no longer the chambermaid against the boss. It was the truth against decades of lies, and the evidence was about to seal the fate of the Langford empire. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, and Caroline connected her laptop to the projector. Suddenly, the mansion's luxurious walls transformed into accusatory screens. The first image, bank statement, showing million-dollar transfers made to accounts in the Caribbean in the name of Charles's shell company. Murmurs echoed through the room. These amounts were disguised as investments from the Langford Group, Caroline explained. The house of cards was beginning to crumble before everyone's eyes. Then an audio clip played. Charles's voice, recorded on a confidential call, sounded cold and calculating. "Fix this. I don't want to hear Evelyn's name again. Got it? Make it go away." Shock ran through the audience. Catherine, his wife, clapped her hand over her mouth, unable to believe that her own husband's voice was evidence against him. Some guests glanced toward the exits, as if to escape being associated with this scandal. Michael Davis added another twist: forged contracts with Edward Langford's signature crudely imitated after his death. These documents were used to exclude Monica from her legitimate inheritance, but an expert examination confirmed they are nothing more than forgeries. The screen displayed the real and forged signatures side by side. The contrast was stark. There was no way to sustain the hoax. As the data emerged, Dr. Ellison confirmed the hidden medical reports. Officially certified tests revealed the presence of arsenic in Evelyn's body, something deliberately omitted from the final version of the certificate. Every detail was a blow to Charles's reputation. The hall bustled, transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Every guest was now an eyewitness to the ruin of an empire. Charles, sweating cold, tried to shout, "A setup! This is all a setup!" But his words echoed hollowly, powerless. The public no longer believed him. With each piece of evidence shown, with each document revealed, his image as a powerful man was shattered. That night, the luxurious Langford mansion was no longer the scene of a ball. It was a courtroom where truth had already pronounced its sentence. The heavy silence of the hall was broken by a collective movement. One by one, the guests began to move away from Charles, as if his mere presence were contagious. The man, who had previously been the center of attention, was now isolated in his own party. Catherine, his wife, stared at him with wide eyes, a mixture of disgust and disbelief. You killed Evelyn?" she asked, her voice breaking. Charles tried to deny it, but desperation was evident in every gesture. The atmosphere changed. The ballroom was no longer a celebration, but a public trial. Some guests shouted "murderer," others recorded everything on video that would soon be shared with the press. Monica stood erect, watching silently, as if finally able to breathe after years of invisibility. The elite, who had previously laughed at her presence, now quietly applauded her courage. The scales had definitively shifted. Catherine, overcome, with rage, threw her glass to the floor. "You have shamed us in front of the entire world." Her words echoed through the hall. Charles, now without allies, only mumbled meaningless excuses. Police officers appeared through the side doors, summoned by Caroline Reed, who had sent the evidence in advance. The jingle of handcuffs, breaking the silence, was like the final nail in the coffin of Charles Langford's reputation. As he was led away by officers, Charles tried to shout to Monica, "You will never be part of this family," but his voice was lost amid the roar of cameras and the roar of the crowd. Monica simply held the ring high, allowing everyone to see the symbol of their bloodline. It was her silent response, more powerful than any words. The decades-old empire crumbled in seconds before everyone's eyes. The king stood naked in his own court. The mansion that was supposed to celebrate his power had become the stage for his downfall. And in that very moment, the invisible chambermaid took the place that had been denied her for so long. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at Langford Estate. The corner office, previously occupied by Charles, now belonged to Monica Harris. The large windows revealed the Los Angeles landscape, but what mattered was the atmosphere within the company, distinctive, vibrant, and human. The walls displayed not only diplomas and contracts, but also photos of social projects supported by the new management. The invisible chambermaid had become the legitimate president of an empire that had previously humiliated her. Under her leadership, the numbers spoke louder than any criticism. In just 6 months, profits increased by 40%. Employees who had been relegated to secondary roles were promoted based on merit and talent. Monica knew how to recognize hidden talents because she herself had been one of those ignored voices. Each promotion was a message. No one would be invisible within Langford Corporation anymore. The impact went beyond the company's walls. Social programs were launched in marginalized neighborhoods of Los Angeles, funded by the new profit. Monica invested in scholarships, language training, and community centers. The same skills she had used to survive as a chambermaid were now transforming the destinies of hundreds of people. The empire was no longer a symbol of arrogance, but of justice and renewal. In the hallways, employees walked with their heads held high. Many remembered the night they saw her humiliated in the salon, only to be reborn as a leader. To them, Monica wasn't just an executive. She was a living symbol of resilience and hope. And as she passed, everyone felt they were standing before someone who had earned each step with dignity, not through favors, but through merit and courage. At home, Monica took the most symbolic step of all. She adopted 2 orphaned girls, offering them the childhood she herself had never had. In their eyes, she found the reflection of Evelyn, her mother, and the promise that the cycle of invisibility had been broken. From the eye of the storm to the calm of justice, Monica proved that the greatest revenge is not to destroy the enemy, but to build something great in the place of ruins. The Langford case was splashed across newspapers around the world, but for Monica, the most important headline wasn't in the media. It was written in the real change in the people around her. The invisible chambermaid, who had once been used as a joke, was now remembered as the woman who faced down the elite and prevailed with dignity. At every meeting, at every social project, Monica made it clear that her goal wasn't blind revenge, but reconstruction, because destruction is easy. Transformation requires courage. The Langford Empire, once a symbol of corruption and arrogance, became a beacon of transparency and inclusion. Monica often repeated in her speeches, "True victory lies not in overthrowing those who oppressed us, but in opening doors so that others never have to experience the same humiliation." These words resonated not only within the company, but also in universities, NGOs, and communities that saw her as a beacon. One woman's story transformed entire systems. The greatest revenge is not to destroy the enemy, but to build something just and great, capable of inspiring generations. Monica Harris proved that the truth can be hidden for decades, but never erased, because dignity, when it finally speaks out, transforms humiliation into triumph, and the voice softens with the final call. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice and truth transform lives.